Investors never learn, do they? They just can't keep their grubby little hands to themselves. They feel the need to constantly meddle with this industry's top talent in an effort to extract more value, which we know exactly what that means. It means more predatory business practices, more predatory microtransactions. It means forcing these teams to release sequel after sequel, regardless if that is the creatively correct thing to do for said team. It means increasing the cadence of this team's releases to the point where they're in complete creative burnout. That's what I've seen from a lot of investors in this industry. They have no idea what they are working with, and they usually end up causing more damage than doing good. And so I came across this post earlier today. This is a post from Den Faminiko Game, which is a Japanese outlet, and it read, among the shareholder proposals surrounding Kadokawa, can FromSoftware continue to create games freely from here on out? We asked Hidetaka Miyazaki about the current development environment. And when I read this, I was naturally very concerned. I'm like, what are they doing with FromSoftware? What do you mean the current development environment? Like, you give these people as much freedom as they want. They're producing some of the best video games in this industry. Please stop. Like, what are you doing? What is going on? So I started looking into this, and apparently there is this activist investment group called Oasis. And you guys might be like, Rurikhan, well, why are you so against the investors? And let me just give you guys a quick glimpse of something that happened just this year. I'm not even going to go that far, just something that happened earlier this year, okay? There was this game that came out called Crimson Desert. You might be familiar with it. When the game came out, because there were like a couple of mixed reviews on Steam, there was some situations with performance, the usual shenanigans in today's modern releases. But the game itself was and is a solid game. But naturally, the second that the investors saw that the reviews were like mixed on Steam, boom, they dipped out. They're just like, hey, yo, bro, peace, I'm out. They took their ball and they went home. And as a result, Pearl Abyss, the makers of Crimson Desert, their shares plunged 29%. Now, I want to show you what the situation is like 3 months later. They're celebrating the fact that they have sold 6 million copies. The game has received critical acclaim from pretty much most of the people that have played it. There's a couple of people that don't like it. Maybe the game is not for them, whatever. But the game is, without a shadow of a doubt, incredibly successful, and the team is working on constantly improving the game. This is to say that often investors have no friggin' idea what the hell they're doing in this industry. And Oasis is not a stranger to this. You guys will be like, whoa, Rurikhan, very, very hostile. What's the deal? So let me tell you about this Oasis company, okay? Crazy Nintendo investor wants us to pay 99 cents for higher Mario jumps. Yeah, it's them. The guys that, this Seth Fisher guy, who is the CEO or the manager of Oasis, whatever, he basically had a lot of shares in Nintendo in 2014. I don't know if they still do, but he basically sent a letter to President Satoru Iwata where he basically was saying that, hey, look, what if you just made Mario jump a little bit higher by 99 cents? Not to mention that it was also they were pushing Nintendo to dive deeper into the mobile market as opposed to continue to develop video games for their consoles, which is completely and absolutely insane. Basically, these guys are just in it for the money. It's just that simple. And, they're investors. It is what it is. But when you are the investment group that basically is willing to make people pay 99 cents to get Mario to jump higher, anything that you do is going to receive quite a bit of analysis from all of us. So they have a presentation here, and throughout this whole presentation, they basically glaze FromSoftware. They're just like, FromSoftware is like the best. It's one of the best things that you guys have in your portfolio, you guys as in Kadokawa, and therefore there is a problem. You guys are leakage. What is it? Continued leakage of value. You guys are leaking value from FromSoftware. And their proposal is that Kadokawa should be the ones publishing FromSoftware titles in the West. Now, as you guys may or may not know, FromSoftware self-publishes in Japan, but when it comes to the West, they usually partner with other companies to publish. So usually a lot of stuff gets published by Bandai Namco. We've had stuff published by Activision, which was Sekiro, and we've had stuff published by Sony, which was Bloodborne, which is, we've all kind of known this. Pretty much most of the people that follow my channel should be aware of this information. Now, an interesting thing that I found here is that whenever they show these titles and they're like, oh, look at all these awards that these titles won, one of the things that they don't show is the number of copies sold, which is quite important for this analysis that they're doing here. So if you guys look, they have, this is just stuff that's talking about reasoning as to why they should publish it themselves. And by the way, this might be the right move. I'm not saying that it is not. I'm not saying that Kadokawa self-publishing FromSoftware would be a bad thing. I'm just concerned because of this part. So this part shows you like the number of units that you have to sell depending on the revenue share that you have. So basically the usual thing where, okay, so we're self-publishing now. That means this game needs to sell a certain million copies depending on the revenue share that they have with the third-party publisher, yada, yada, yada. And it tells you how many million copies it becomes profitable at, it becomes more beneficial to actually self-publish the game. And why is this concerning? Because when they show these games here and they show all of these accolades that these games have received, they don't show the number of sales. So for instance, Demon's Souls in 2009, which by the way was considered a failed title by the people that were running FromSoftware at the time, which is the reason why Miyazaki was able to basically take over the project and do whatever the hell he wanted, because people didn't want it to actually work on this project. And Miyazaki was like, oh, can I run it? Can I just do whatever I want? They're like, whatever. Thank God somebody's taken over this damn thing, this terrible product. And then he made Demon's Souls. So huge risk taking right there. But Demon's Souls only really sold 2.5 million. Now, these are pretty respectable numbers at the time. Then you look at Dark Souls, and it sold 12 million. Dark Souls 2, 10 million. Dark Souls 3, 10.5 to 11 million. Then there's also the remaster of the original Dark Souls, which is another 3 million. But then you go to Bloodborne. Bloodborne's actually sold less. It only sold 9 million. So at this point, usually what happens whenever something sells less than its previous titles, the parent companies tend to kind of like start leaning in, hey, what is going on? Then you have Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, which sells 10 million. All of these games are mentioned here, by the way. Like you can see Bloodborne, Sekiro Die Twice, all of the Dark Souls games. And then you have something which would definitely get them in trouble, which is Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon. Now, if you look here, they're like saying, oh, look at Best Action Game, PlayStation Awards, Partner Award, User's Choice Award, Japan Game Awards, Award for Excellence, etc. So they're basically glazing Armored Core 6. Sometimes I wonder if they even know that this game only sold 3 million copies, because this would be considered a devastating failure by a lot of investments. Because like, well, what do you mean? Their previous title sold 10 million. This one sold 3 million. And we all know why. As fans of gaming, we know exactly why it sold less, because it's much more niche of a title. It doesn't have the broad appeal of Dark Souls and the Souls-likes and all of the, stuff that made FromSoftware much more famous than it was before. But it is still a very important title for the fans of Armored Core, and it is still a profitable title, which is the most important thing. FromSoftware makes titles that are profitable. They might not be, every single, and usually they end up being every single time like giga successful and super profitable. But in the case of Armored Core, I would imagine it probably wasn't as profitable as, a lot of people expected. It was still profitable. But it's important, at least from my interpretation and what I know of FromSoftware, it's important for them to be able to take risks. So they were able to take a risk on Bloodborne because Sony was footing the bill. They were able to take a risk on Sekiro because Activision was footing the bill. And this was very smart of them, because Sekiro was a big risk. It's one of the biggest departures from the stuff that they've done before between Dark Souls and Bloodborne and all of that stuff. Sekiro is very different from these games. It was a huge risk. So they're like, okay, these Activision people, they want to give us money, so let's just go right ahead and, make sure that they're the ones that are giving us the money, and so we can basically take all the chances we want on their dime, which is much smarter than, footing the bill yourself, and it allows them to take more risks, which, in my book, that's a good thing. If Kadokawa are the ones self-publishing, they're going to expect them to always sell 10 plus million copies and all of that. Not to mention that If Oasis was in charge, like if they have their own people in the board, considering their attitude towards Nintendo and trying to force them into going more mobile and charge people so that Mario can jump higher, you think that this Oasis investment group would see Armored Core selling 3 million copies and be like, that's fine? Of course not. Of course not. They're going to see that, wait, you sold 10 million. Now you're selling 3 million. This is not okay. What makes you think that this is okay? This is absolutely insane. But basically, they go on to glaze and glaze and glaze, and then at the end they say Kadokawa's problem is no longer whether FromSoftware has the capability to support greater in-house publishing, but whether management has the urgency and discipline to execute this long-awaited strategy. So basically, they just want, you guys need to self-publish. Just self-publish. But the reality is FromSoftware likes taking chances. And in order for them to continue taking chances, like, for instance, Duskbloods, that's another massive risk that they're taking. Night Rain, that was another massive risk. Notice that Night Rain is not in this presentation. But, you know, these are risks that FromSoftware needs to take, creative risks, but it lets them flex their creative muscles, and this is why they're such an excellent development team. And if they are forced into a situation where their releases need to be formulaic, that is going to be a huge negative. Now, Hidetaka Miyazaki tries to calm everybody down, and he says, I am aware of the general facts that have been reported regarding the matter you inquired about. However, I'm not in a position to know any further details, and since there are many other stakeholders and parties involved, it is difficult for me to make any in-depth comments. Please understand that. Therefore, I will speak only within the scope of what I can say, and this represents my personal opinion, not the company's. First of all, I am generally satisfied with the current development environment at FromSoftware. This is super important. The reason he's generally satisfied is because he can keep on taking creative risks. This is super important for this team. I cannot emphasize this enough. Like, if they had just stuck to Dark Souls, right, which was, if you think about it, from basically every other development studio, well, most other development studios in this industry, if you think about it, the moment FromSoftware struck gold with Dark Souls, they should have, you know, the correct thing from a financial standpoint should have been, okay, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Dark Souls 4, Dark Souls 5, Dark Souls 6. There would never have been a Bloodborne. There would never have been a Sekiro. There would sure as hell have never have been an Armored Core 6, because they wouldn't have been allowed to take on these chances. He goes on to say, while there are always areas for improvement, we are able to create the games we want to make without excessive interference. And this is something that absolutely needs to be preserved. We're able to create the games we want to make without excessive interference. I believe that maintaining this kind of environment in the future and being able to focus as much as possible on the game creation itself is the most important thing, both for me personally and for FromSoftware as a whole. If we have been able to create things that users find valuable, I believe one of the major sources of that has been precisely this environment. In a lot of ways, this almost feels like a warning. This is almost like Miyazaki publicly saying, you guys really want to mess with this? We got a winning strategy here. You really want to fuck with this? Is this something that you want to do? Again, if you guys look back at what I've said throughout this video, it reflects so perfectly onto this sentence. If we have been able to create things that users find valuable, I believe one of the major sources of that has been precisely this environment. What environment is it referring? The environment that I've talked about, how, oh, we need to take a risk. Let's get Sony to foot the bill. Hell yeah. We're going to do Bloodborne. Hey, we need to take another risk. Let's get, Activision to foot the bill. Fantastic. Hey, we need to take another risk. Let's get Bandai Namco to foot the bill. That's kind of like how they've been doing stuff. And that's why they've been able to continue with this creative output that is absolutely phenomenal. But anyways, he then goes on to say, finally, if any users happen to read this message, we will continue to do our utmost to create valuable games, even more than before. Whether it's our already announced titles or future unannounced ones, I hope you'll continue to look forward to them. We absolutely do, Miyazaki, and I hope that this company, this Oasis activist investors, I hope that they don't mess with a winning formula. I'm very concerned about this situation. There are a lot of things that can go wrong because the fact that FromSoftware can continue to gamble on IPs by basically saying, hey, we're going to take a chance. They can just really stretch out the rings. Like Duskbloods, for instance. They're taking a chance with Duskbloods. What do? Let's get Nintendo to foot the bill. They got money. It's genius. And we constantly get solid quality titles. Why you got to mess with that? These investors, man, it's just so incredibly frustrating.